Hey guys, Galusier here, and today I'm joined with John Paul and George, two members of the dev team for new game Chromancer. Hey guys, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much. A pleasure to be here.
So as we watch this gameplay from yesterday's game with me and John Paul, George, why don't you let us know a little bit about the core mechanics of the game and what makes it so special?
Chromancer is an online card game, as you can see, and we're lifelong card game players that have put this game together really so that it has unique mechanics. And the mechanics are unique enough that, honestly, your instincts as a card player will often make you lose the game, which to us is pretty fun and interesting. It's not at all like many of the other card games where your goal is to knock down the opponent's hit points to 0 or something like that. It's a little more interesting. As you can see from the gameplay footage, there are 3 basic targets that you have, and the point of the game is to destroy those 3 targets while the opponent's trying to destroy your 3 targets on your side. And those targets represent, really quite simply, the deck, the discard pile, and the pool of resources of each player. So when you play Chromancer, the first thing you do is you sit down at the table and you decide where on the table you're going to put those things. You know, from where are you going to draw your cards, to where are you going to discard them, and where are you going to keep the little pile of resources that you use to pay for everything. And so what's cool is that about the fact that that's important is that if any of those things are damaged or destroyed, it affects your ability to play the game normally. For example, if I attack my opponent's bank and I destroy his bank, he's no longer able to save resources from turn to turn. If I destroy his deck, he's no longer able to draw cards for the rest of the game. If I destroy his discard pile, any spell that he uses or something like that, which is usually temporary and goes to the discard pile after it's used, any spell that's temporary would leave play forever once he uses it. So that's kind of the core mechanics of it, and it really, really changes the way you have to think about deck building. It changes the way you have to think about playing an actual card game, because you have to strategize not only how to understand what your opponent is doing very quickly so you can disable him, but it also means that you have to figure out how to deck build so that you can resist, more or less, losing the ability to do something central to a card game, like, for example, drawing cards.
Yeah, I would add to that it's interesting in the sense that the 3 targets that George referenced have very different functions in the game, but ultimately, because of the way that they interact with each other, the game does end up being quite balanced. And what I mean by that is that you can lose one of these structures early on, but still come back. A lot of the games that we play, I mean, somebody might lose a structure fairly early and ultimately come back to win the game. And that's because none of them are kind of too powerful versus the other. You don't have too big of an advantage. It's really that the game, you need to kind of adapt to the new rules, if you will, and kind of come up with a way to win. And a lot of times it does happen.
Yeah, we saw that yesterday when we got a chance to play and hear through this game footage that early on I was able to take out one of your buildings, John Paul, and me being the inexperienced player, I was like, yes, I got him. Like, I already took out one of his buildings. And then throughout the course of the game, this power started to slowly shift back to you, and that the fact that you lost one of those buildings was not a crippling blow for you, and you were still able to work out a victory.
Well, that's right, and like I said before, it is the kind of game where you do need to be adaptive. And for example, if you lose your graveyard, then you need to realize what that means, and understanding how the graveyard interacts with your castle, with your deck. It means that you have to play in a slightly different way. It means that you might need to be preserving your creatures, not being so rash with your attacks, being a little bit more cautious about how you defend, and so on and so forth. And that's really what we mean when we say adaptive strategy to an extent.
So, if you don't mind me switching gears here for just a second, guys, I've been really enamored by the artwork that I've been seeing coming out of the game, and so much so that I made a video on my channel just about the artwork, showing off some of it, and I'll put some of it up on the screen for everyone to see right now just to give them a taste of it. So, and I know, George, that this is something that you're also really proud of and excited about. It's really a good looking game.
Well, that's important to us. We have found some really fantastic, relatively unknown artists who are producing this art for the game. And, we're an indie company that's really just trying to create a really good game experience for everyone, so that the quality of the art matches the quality of the mechanics of the game. And we are an indie company that's on Kickstarter right now, actually, to raise funds to pay for the art. It's live right now. And so we're exposing all of that art through our Kickstarter page and through our website. So I invite anybody who wants to really get into it and see it. There's more every day, to pay those pages a visit and browse through what we've got. It's pretty spectacular.
It is, and I'll put that link in the description so everyone can head over to the Kickstarter, check out that artwork.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that in case it wasn't kind of supremely obvious, the version of the game that we have and that you've played, Galucia, and that we're demoing to people and having people playtest at the moment is a pre-art, pre-graphics alpha version. So, in our final build, we absolutely intend to have a UI, a design, kind of a graphical look that will be commensurate with the quality that we've showcased already with some of the card art which we've produced.
Right, and that's what the Kickstarter's for, because we need to get that artwork put together. I mean, just based on the samples that you have already on those pages, if the rest of the game looks as good as those do, then it's really going to be a sharp game.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we have probably about 20 or so pieces at the moment, maybe a little bit more now. But it's a game that will launch with 300 cards. So there's quite a bit more to do, and really that's what the crowdfunding effort is about.
So you just mentioned that it's launching with 300 cards, which I actually didn't know, and that's pretty impressive. So what are the future plans for it, though? How often do you think it's going to get updates, more cards being added, so on and so forth? Do you guys have that kind of laid out yet?
Well, sure. 300 cards at launch is a very big body of cards, and it's going to be a while after we launch that we're going to, be working with our community really to make sure that everything is balanced and further play test. We're going to do as much of that as we can before we launch, but there's just a natural cycle of, as people get into the game and as they're in ranked play and as there are tournaments and so forth, there are going to be different decks that are almost discovered as people build things that are popular. And there is a very, extensive, really, lifespan, if you want to call it, of that initial set being played in the game. So it's really only after that starts becoming more known, if you will, that we'll think about expanding and adding expansions. What I'll say about expansions, which I think is really the key point, is that this is a project that's been designed over the course of 7 years, and in that long time period, we have designed about 4,000 different cards. And
wow.
Yeah, it's a lot. And the reason for designing so many different cards is not really to intend to release all of them at once, obviously. It's not even really to release all of them altogether. It's so that when you explore the horizontal space a little bit of the mechanics and you understand all of the possibilities of the game, it puts you in a position where when you're going to add expansions to the game, you're not going to create things like power creep. You're not going to create new mechanics that are going to invalidate the old mechanics because you've already considered them and you've considered how they will work together. And that's very, very important to us as card players. We want to make sure we have a game that players can get into if they feel like spending their time in our game, if at some point they feel like spending some money in our game. We want to do everything we can to protect that investment of time and money by having a game whose integrity basically lasts as many years as we can and for as long as the life of the product.
So one last thing I wanted to kind of ask you about before I let you go. The game hopefully will come out in December, and when it does, what can people expect from how it's set up as far as, obviously it's going to be free to play, which is great, and when we were off air, we talked about how it's not pay to win, which is awesome, and you can mention that if you want. But how are people going to acquire some of the more rare cards? Because it seems like a lot of the games out there nowadays that are free to play, especially, but all these trading card games, it's going to take a lot of real life money to get some of the more advanced cards, which really seals people's victories, and that's how these games become pay to win instead of just everyone has a chance. So what are you doing that kind of separates you from that and makes this game unique?
Well, look, in the first place, we're card players, and we've been on the receiving end of pay to win way too many times. We hate it, and we're never going to do that to other people. But it goes a little bit farther than that. It goes to the point that we actually understand what it means not to be pay to win. We actually know what it means to be free to play. A lot of people talk about free to play, but they don't seem to realize that free to play is not just about game economics. It's also about game design. You can have a game that's in theory free to play, but if a free player has to spend 60,000 hours to acquire any chance against a paid player, that's not actually a free to play game. So we solve that problem in a number of ways, but the most basic way is that we actually know what all the cards are that are most relevant for deck building, that will give somebody the best ability to actually win a game. And we make all of those cards readily available to free players because they are the common cards in our system. There are rare cards in our system, but those cards are cards that represent sort of peripheral or complicated or optional mechanics, things that are a little bit trickier to use and maybe give you more deck options, but absolutely no advantage. And we're just confident that players will like our game enough and be dedicated enough to what we're doing that they will be willing to collect those rare cards, and that we can monetize, if you want to think of it that way, through those players. Not because we're ignorant or something when it comes to business, but rather because we just subscribe to the model that when you have a product that really serves the needs of people, and when people see this is really not a pay-to-win game, this is really something where I can actually be one of the top players in the game as a free player, and that's realistic. Well, we think that people will be very happy with that because, as you said, so many of the other games out there are the opposite. And so many of the other games out there, it just feels a little bit abusive as you play them, the way they're handling your investment of time and money. So we just want to be not that. That's what we care about because, again, we're card players. We've lived the transition from physical to online ourselves, and we've been on the receiving end of a lot of these other systems before. And it's not necessarily to blame those companies either. I mean, it is a transition that's happening across gaming. It's influenced by social gaming. It's influenced by short-term gaming. It's influenced by companies thinking they have to build a product to serve somebody for just a few weeks at a time because they'll move on to other games. And so they're building a product which constantly invalidates itself, if you will, in that your investment of time after 2 weeks isn't going to matter to them, so they're just going to create more cards that are more powerful after that point. We're not like that. We want to have a game which is very much like the mid to late 90s original collectible card games, which are long-term games in which you're, as a player and as a collector, you're in the game for a long time because there's an integrity that's preserved.
It sounds like this game's going to have a lot of longevity. I really like that, and I think you're right that if people really get into it, that you still are going to have the people supporting it enough that you're going to be able to do what you need to do on your end and get those funds coming in. I know me personally, I'm a big collector, and I can't help it. I'm personally probably going to try to get all 300 of those starting cards and anything else that comes out because I'm really looking forward to this game. So big thanks to both John Paul and George for joining me.
Thank you for having us, Galucia. I look forward to the rematch. And I will add that, in spite of the game being in alpha, we are actively inviting people to play test the game on a regular basis. We want people to be involved in the development of the game to get their feedback. Ultimately, that's extremely useful for us because those are the people that we're making the game for. Our next one is actually this Sunday. So details are up on our Kickstarter page and on our website. So I invite anyone who's interested to come check it out.
All right, awesome. Well, I will check it out because I am also looking forward to that rematch. Now I know a little bit about the game, and I want to give it a go. So
great.
Excellent.
Thanks for that, guys. I really appreciate you coming out.
Thank you for having us. It's really our pleasure to be here.
Pleasure's all mine. Thanks again, guys. So that was John Paul and George, two of the members of the dev team behind Chromancer. Big thanks to them for coming out. Make sure you go and check out their game, both on their website and the Kickstarter. Also, big thanks to you for watching and supporting, and I'll see you next time.